This is a Pasco Media production. Please visit pascomedia.com.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show where we explore the miraculous nature of the mundane as we look at one part of the Catholic tradition to help you engage more fully in the practice of faith. Past episodes are available at renovopodcast.com. I'm Doug Duke, and today it's a great follow-up to a show we did on Vatican II. We are going to talk about the College of Cardinals, and I picked this topic because it blows my mind how little we actually know and understand about kind of the goings-on of bishops. Like, I don't think the bulk of us, the majority of us, actually understand that bishops pretty much run the church, okay? Like, we like to believe, all roads lead to Rome, and it's all, we are the Roman Catholic Church, and that is true, but we have to understand that popes throughout history have given a tremendous amount of authority to local bishops, and in so doing, really mobilized this College of Cardinals as a real body of authority. And I don't think we understand what the College of Cardinals is. So this is a cool topic for me because, down the road, we're gonna have another pope. I mean, I love Pope Francis. I've lived now through St. John Paul II, Benedict XVI, of course, who's still alive, hanging on, and Pope Francis. And it's going to happen again, and it's not going to be too far off in the future. So it's kind of fun to learn like what that process is. So here's the thing. The roots of the College of Cardinals and really kind of the idea of electing a pope, the papal conclave, they're part of the very, very early practices of the Western and then later kind of Roman Catholic Church. It's really with the origins of the papacy, the modern papacy as we know it. I know Peter's the first pope, I know, but in terms of the way the papacy actually functions, in terms of hierarchy, that came much, much later. Trust me, when you go to heaven and you meet Peter, Peter's going to say, man, I'm not the same as Innocent III. So we did a show on Innocent III. You can watch that later. Listen to that later. All right. So initially, Christians, given their name, first in Antioch, they used the Greek term papas, or the Latin papa, to refer to all clergy, with whom they had kind of like a close relationship. That was a beautiful the way that we regarded the early ordained, and very small kids use this term to relate to their dad, to their papa, to their abba. Congregants, the worshiping body, they use it to kind of denote the same kind of love and the relationship for their bishops, but that was for all bishops. Now, the Bishop of Rome was no exception. Now, eventually, the word became associated only with the Bishop of Rome, whose power, both temporal and ecclesial, grew slowly from about the 4th century. Okay, so the 4th century is where we really see the papacy elevate in authority. Okay, so early Christian congregations, they selected their own bishops, and they elected them from among the priests. Now, following the election, neighboring bishops would gather and then they would consecrate the new bishop by laying their hands on his head. So the ceremony really kind of ratified the election of a new bishop by the lay people of the congregation. The bishops affirmed the lay people's desires. Okay, now in those cases where the congregation was really divided over candidates, they just weren't sure, neighboring bishops used this kind of formal recognition to actually decide the election. So that was also deeply rooted in our history. Okay, now eventually the approval of fellow bishops and the consecration ceremony became more important than kind of the local congregation in the selection process. So in 325 AD, or in the Common Era, the Council of Nicaea officially granted bishops the power of veto over adjacent congregations. Now, before you flip out about this, lay people, you have to understand something. Like, lay people, as the Middle Ages would have been kind of developed, would have been heavily influenced by the local politic, There's no way that would escape. And as nations post-Roman Empire begin to really evolve, you have countries vying for personal authority. So you can see where temporal power would come in conflict with the hierarchical power of the papacy or of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I say that with some reservation because there's clearly, look at your history books, a lot of abuse of the power of the Roman Catholic Church also. But you can see where the bishops would have, led by the Spirit, made a decision that within the confines of their leadership, they would be able to veto that type of authority. Okay, so don't freak out. Now, for the Bishop of Rome, these fellow bishops were the bishops of what would have been called the Suburbicarian diocese, and that's the 7 dioceses around the city of Rome. So historically, the term cardinal referred to any priest or bishop permanently assigned to a specific church. So thus the Suburbicarian bishops were also known as cardinals. Now just remember how small the church was then. Okay, so now under any name, these guys often had their own kind of agendas, okay, for making papal elections. And sometimes they're pretty contentious. And other times it was pretty chaotic, okay? The nobles of Rome frequently intervened, all right, putting forth their own candidates when it came to a new pope. And as the actual and essentially symbolic power of the papacy grew, the Holy Roman Emperor also interfered, either directly or through, agencies of cardinals that they controlled, okay? Eventually, papal elections became embroiled, okay, with all kinds of disputes between religious and secular powers, as well as between those who were super traditional and those who were really reforming, not unlike today, okay? Now, the death of Pope Stephen IX in 1058 created the most chaos, all right? So there was this kind of anti-reform faction led by a really small group of aristocrats. They elected and installed Benedict X, later known as an anti-pope, or what's an illegally elected pope lacking proper authority, okay? 6 months later, the Reform cardinals selected their own candidate, Pope Nicholas II, who was supported by French troops. The new pope then marched on Rome, where he deposed Benedict. Now, in April of 1059, Nicholas issued this decree ruling that cardinal bishops should elect the pope. So the cardinal clerks, kind of the remaining clergy of Rome, and the people could then give their, essentially their assent to a candidate. Okay, so this kind of new code, this codification of the College of Cardinals, of the electoral process, it did not guarantee a smooth succession. It just didn't. On Nicholas's death, all these differing factions kind of elevated both popes and anti-popes to the papacy, and all hell broke loose. Okay, now oddly, the continuing chaos actually contributes to the eventual development of what we now know as the College of Cardinals. As popes and these anti-popes maneuver around for a position, they courted the cardinals. They wanted their support, these specific Suburbican bishops, okay? In an effort to lure all these cardinal priests of Rome over to their side, the anti-pope Clement III granted them this unprecedented influence within the church, okay? In order to retain some of the cardinals on his own side, Pope Urban II granted his supporters similar power. So there was a real power move for these specific bishops, okay? Now, under Urban II, church administration was really increasingly centralized, okay? So it created what's now known as the Curia, okay? The Curia, Curia, was modeled on royal courts with cardinals in the role of nobles. And inevitably, this kind of led to a rise in the number as well as the influence and the power of the cardinals. Obviously, people want authority. They want power. In 1586, Pope Sixtus V set the maximum number of cardinals at 70. So he restructured essentially the Secretariat of State of the papacy, naming 6 cardinals specifically to oversee all secular administration. So the remainder were assigned to supervise a variety of all kinds of spiritual affairs, different departments or what are called congregations. Okay, not the same as a parish congregation, but groups of folks doing stuff in the church. Now, at the same time, he named his 15-year-old nephew as a cardinal, totally undermining his own legacy of reform. Okay, it is total nepotism, all right? Sixtus reorganized the College of Cardinals. Sixtus not only limited the number of cardinals, he decided that of the 70, 6 would be cardinal bishops, that is the 6 suburbicarian bishops, okay? 50 would belong to the category of cardinal priests, and the remaining 14 were to be called cardinal deacons. That was a thing. Okay, now on December 15th, 1958, so you look at the change of, 1586 to 1958, we were navigating that reality. Isn't that amazing? Okay, on December 15th, 1958, the newly elected Pope John the 23rd convened what's called a consistory, okay? And in one of the first official acts that he made, Pope John the 23rd abolishes Sixtus's rule, limiting the number of cardinals to 70. John the 23rd's predecessor, Pius the 12th, had allowed the college to kind of dwindle to a mere 52 members. And of these, 12 were over the age of 80. So in a direct reaction to this, John the 23rd immediately elevates 23 young, energetic priests to the College of Cardinals. And within 4 years, John had brought the number of cardinals up to 87. Now, in this, which is totally innovative. Now, in a further innovation, these younger cardinals were really drawn from like a much wider geographical sphere. So they created a way more like an international body of cardinals for the first time ever. Now, these new cardinals way better represented the composition of the modern Roman Catholic Church, okay? Now, upon John the 23rd's death in 1963, 80 cardinals gathered to elect the new pope. This was the largest conclave up to that time, 20th century, amazing. And they selected Giovanni Montini on the 5th ballot, and he took the name Paul VI. Now, this new pope continued John's work of reforming the College of Cardinals and, of course, the work of Vatican II, okay? But in a surprising act, Paul granted the rank of cardinal bishop, the highest rank of cardinal, to the patriarchs of the Eastern Catholic churches, sometimes called Eastern Rite churches. That was a big deal. So these patriarchs serve as the heads of churches, which are all self-governing, but in full communion with the Roman Catholic Church and the Bishop of Rome. So the Eastern Catholic churches, they tend to use Eastern traditions and rites, but are theologically aligned with Rome. That was a huge deal, really wrapping his arms around post-Eastern schism. Amazing. Paul ruled in 1970 that the cardinals over the age of 80 could not participate in electing the next pope. He put an age limit on cardinals. That was a big deal. So further, he limited the number of cardinals under the age of 80 to no more than 120. And at the same time, he didn't set a limit on the total number of cardinals. Cardinals over 80 retain their title and position, but simply were not able to vote in the papal conclave. So there could still be more than that total living cardinals, but there would be a number for the conclave period. So in this way, Paul really kind of hoped to prevent the development of any kind of like gerontocracy within the church, like getting to a point where it was just all about the preservation of the way it was. Okay, he wanted there to be fresh blood within the church all the time. All right, so white smoke rising from the Sistine Chapel's chimney by 1976. The College of Cardinals contained 138 cardinals. This was like by far the largest, most international group to serve up to that time ever in the history of the church. That's amazing. So upon Paul's death in 1978, 111 cardinals were eligible to serve as electors at the papal conclave. Unfortunately, their choice, John Paul I, died only 6 weeks later. Unbelievable, right? That's incredible. This meant that another papal conclave had to be called. And again, the same 100 electors participate since none had turned 80 during the 3-day pontificate of John Paul I. They all regather. And in sharp contrast to his predecessor, John Paul II gets elected, and he reigns for 28 years, now St. John Paul II. At his death, which is fairly recent, the College of Cardinals consisted of 183 cardinals, only 117 of whom were under the age of 80 and therefore eligible to vote. St. John Paul, he was known to name a lot of cardinals. And a lot of that was because he wanted to really preserve, his mission going forward, a post-Vatican II pope that really wanted to bring the documents to life. That's kind of cool. John Paul's long papacy basically meant that of the 117 electors, all but 3 had been appointed by him and had no experience with holding a conclave. That's just crazy. So there was all these he was Pope for so long and named so many cardinals. Then when it came time for another conclave, no one had done it before. That's something to think about. So as of February 2018, there are 216 cardinals, 118 of whom are cardinal electors. Now, that fresh group, that conclave that elected Benedict XVI, you got to remember, Cardinal Ratzinger, was a cardinal, obviously, and was very influential among the folks. There's a reason why that conclave was so quick, was that they didn't, it was all new. It was a new experience. And the Spirit led them to a very clear choice. And I think that's important for the church to recognize how beautiful that is, that it was very efficient when Benedict XVI was nominated. And then, of course, when Francis was elected, it was also pretty quick, but also a little bit out of the blue. Now, as of June 28th, 2017, Pope Francis created 5 more cardinals, and they're all cardinal electors. That's kind of cool. Now, in the United States, living cardinals, they don't all live in the United States, but the ones that are from the U.S., this is kind of fun. So, Cardinal Burke, he's in Rome. He's in the Curia. Agostino, he's in the administration. Cachiavelin. He's also in the Roman Curia. Cardinal Supich, Chicago. Cardinal DiNardo, Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston. He's a great guy. Cardinal Timothy Dolan in New York. Cardinal Farrell, who is in the Roman Curia. Also, Cardinal Harvey, Cardinal Levada, Cardinal Mahoney, who's retired from California. Cardinal Maeda, Archbishop Emeritus of Detroit. Cardinal McCarrick, Emeritus of Washington, D.C. Cardinal O'Brien, Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, part of the Roman Curia. Cardinal O'Malley, Boston, of course. Cardinal Regali, Emeritus in Philadelphia. Cardinal Stafford, part of the Apostolic Penitentiary in the Roman Curia. Cardinal Tobin in Newark, awesome guy too. What a huge defender of the immigrants. And Cardinal Wuerl in Washington, D.C. So of the United States, there's quite a bit of representation, which is pretty cool to think about. Guys, the reason this is amazing is because, we rag on the Catholic Church sometimes, especially in the secular world. We really rag on the Catholic Church. All this traditions, all this ritual. What is all this? We forget that the origins of hierarchical structure, the preservation of the institutional side of church, is deeply, deeply rooted in thousands of years of tradition that still calls upon the Holy Spirit as the central guide for discerning leadership. There is a reason. I know this is a hot topic. There is a reason why it is not a democracy. We are not democratically necessarily electing our leadership. We are prayerfully discerning, and there has to be a modus for that regarding our leadership, regardless of how you want to spar with a bishop or you disagree with this ideology or that ideology. The reality is that is an ordained priest who's been drawn forth to follow in the footsteps of the apostles, the apostolic tradition, and then from that position drawn forth even further to a position of leadership that is a part of a college of cardinals who discern the Bishop of Rome. That's a big deal. And that system is over 1,500 years old. I just think that's amazing. You can rag on the oldness that sometimes is associated with church, but to have a system of discernment and election that still functions today gives me a lot of hope. Gives me a lot of just preserves for me a lot of dignity. It's wow, this works. This process works. Our leadership is amazing. Pope Francis is amazing. Pope John Paul II, Saint John Paul II is amazing. Cardinal Ratzinger turned Pope Benedict XVI. These are amazing. Man, look at the boldness of John the 23rd, the courage of Paul VI to carry those traditions forward. Just in the 20th and 21st century, we have been blessed with powerful leadership as a result of the education and the discernment of the College of Cardinals. And now you know how it works. Awesome. Don't forget to visit renovopodcast.com for past episodes. Please subscribe to, review, and rate our podcast. We always appreciate your input, your topic suggestions, questions, and/or comments. are always welcome at doug@renovopodcast.com. Learn more about me on Twitter and Instagram at DTOOKE and the number 1. Friends, always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.